Available now from the MVD Rewind collection is Boaz Davidson's 1982 80s teen sex comedy drama classic, The Last American Virgin. This is a film that I remember seeing, seeing part of when it was on HBO when I was a kid. I was watching it with my parents, as weird as that may seem, and then a certain scene came up, and I was physically lifted and removed from the room despite my protests because apparently a sex scene wasn't right for a kid who was 8 years old at the time. So what this is Davidson had made a series of films in Israel that were very, very popular. They're called the Lemon Popsicle films, and they were set in the early '60s, I think, and they were basically based on his hijinks as a youth. His coming of age story was reinterpreted as a semi-fictionalized series of movies, and they were wildly popular. And Canon Films, this is a Canon film, by the way, wanted to bring that story to America, and so it was basically retooled and remade. And I guess it wasn't all the original Lemon Popsicle film. It was some aspects of a couple of the different movies were brought together, scenes from the various movies were brought together and essentially just remade exactly for Last American Virgin. Same cameraman, I believe, that shot those films, or the original at least, shot this one as well. The supplements on this are great in telling this story. And the basic story is it's about three friends who are looking to get a little action. One of them is the titular Last American Virgin, Gary, portrayed by Lawrence Monoson, and he's the nice guy. He's the quiet, nice guy who has the brash, pretty boy, semi-sleaze friend who's always making it with the ladies and always knows what to do, and he's Slick Rick. And then he's got the heavy-set friend who's kind of a goof, kind of the jokester, and the movie is a series of adventures of them trying to find love in the early '80s, and eventually Gary sets his sights on the new girl in town, portrayed by Diane Franklin, and things go interestingly. Things go realistically, let's say that. So once the Diane Franklin character is introduced, Karen, the film is mostly about Gary trying to win her over, trying to make her notice him in the quiet, nice guy way, while his friends are still trying to do everything they can to get as much action as they can. So it's got everything. It's got sex, it's got drugs, it's got hijinks, it's got amazing colors. The transfer is excellent on this, by the way. Looks way better than it ever did back in the '80s. I didn't see it in the theater, but when I saw it on cable, it never looked like this. And the soundtrack. Let's talk about the soundtrack for a second, shall we? They touted this film originally big time in the trailers and on the poster with all the bands that were in it. This soundtrack plays like the greatest hits of the first few years of the '80s. It's unbelievable. I've got it written down over here. You have Devo, Blondie, The Police, REO Speedwagon, The Cars, The Commodores, and more. It's like wall-to-wall hits. And I guess some of the songs were already hits when they used them in the film. Tommy Tutone does the theme song. But it's wall-to-wall music, and it's great. It really helps nail the era. It's the fashion of the era. It's the hair of the era. It's the cars of the era. It's movies worth it for just that alone. And it dips into territory that movies wouldn't anymore. Specifically with a locker room scene that you really wouldn't do anymore. And it kind of, the pendulum swings back and forth in this film. Sometimes it's really silly, wacky comedy. Sometimes it's super earnest drama. And it goes both ways. A lot of films in that era didn't do that, or they would, but it's an odd balance. Some people have said it feels like you're kind of watching two different movies at times. But and again, Boaz Davidson talks about this. A lot of this is or what happened to him. Like this, the overall story of this is based on what happened to him, and a lot of the hijinks with his friends are what happened to him. And in one of the supplements, it's really interesting. They go and they show you shots or stills or sequences from Last American Virgin, and then they show you the Lemon Popsicle equivalent, and you can see what they really just remade the movie here and updated the time period. Apparently, according to Lawrence Monoson in one of the extras, they originally had signed the cast of this film to a couple of sequels. Like they were going to do several of these movies, but for whatever reason they just didn't, and enough time passed that it was kind of pointless to try to carry it on after so many years. So I kind of love this movie. I kind of love this movie because despite how non-PC it is in many ways now, it's really real. It really, you could see Gary, the main character, as this sort of mopey, kind of whiny guy, but he is the avatar for everybody in the audience who was the nice guy. And you know what the saying is on how they finish. He was the nice guy in high school, and where does that get you? And trying to maintain being the nice guy. The cast is mostly faces you don't really recognize at this point. Steve Antin plays Rick, the sort of sleazy friend, and he did a few things. He's in the Goonies. He's like the leader of like the preppy bad guys in the Goonies, and he did a bunch of stuff. And he went on to be a director. He directed Burlesque, the Cher Christina Aguilera film, and a bunch of other things, a lot of music videos. And Diane Franklin, you would know from Better Off Dead and Amityville 2 and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And Kimmy Robertson plays her best friend. Kimmy Robertson played Lucy on Twin Peaks, still does. Whenever they do a new Twin Peaks, she's still in it. And other than that, not a lot of familiar faces. So it seems that much more real, I think. So I love this film. I was excited to get this from MVD, and oops, caused a minor earthquake there. So the packaging, let's talk about the packaging. I have a physical copy here. Now, if you're like me and you haunted video stores in the 80s, this packaging looks incredibly familiar, and I love that they did this. MVD Rewind Collection, a lot of times their packaging replicates the overall look of an old media home entertainment videotape, but this pretty accurately, it's not completely the same, but it's if you're only relying on memory, this is exactly the same as the old MGM UA home video box. All the design, which is it warms my cold heart. And it wasn't an MGM home video release. It was released by Canon, and MGM handled a lot of the Canon home video. So you've got the slip case, and then you've got the case, which then we get there. That's the old Rewind Collection look that has that Media Home Entertainment logo on it, or facsimile of it. And then you get the disc. So the disc itself, if you can see that, looks like a videotape. And then you have a fold-out mini poster tucked in here and a cool little promotional shot of the cast on the inside. So the packaging is killer. The movie is killer. The soundtrack is killer. And what are the extras? Well, I had previously purchased this because there was an Olive Films release a while ago, which I think maybe you still can get on Blu-ray in America, but it had no extras on it. And I saw that the Arrow UK video release did have extras on it. So being somebody who has the ability to play discs from other regions, I imported the Arrow video release, and the extras are the same on this. So you're not, if you didn't get the Arrow release and you're like, oh, I don't own this yet, but I really want the extras, you're getting all the extras that were on the Arrow release. The Olive Films version, as I said, had none. So this is like the best of all worlds. It's a beautiful transfer, really cool packaging, cooler than the Arrow release. The Arrow release did have a booklet with writing from Robin Bougie and some other cool people. This doesn't have that, so the only thing you're missing between the Arrow and the MVD. The extras include, but are not limited to, an interview with Boaz Davidson, which is a half hour and is great. Seems like a really nice guy. And he talks about the making of the original Lemon Popsicle films. He talks about the process of bringing that to America and the casting and the shooting and dealing with Canon and the release and all of that. You get interview with Lawrence Monoson, which is really good, where he really gets into and analytical about the character he played. He played Gary in the film, as I said, the lead. And cool to see him now, and cool to hear his perspective on the whole thing. And looking back about how he got the job and doing all this when he wasn't even 18 yet, and on and on and on. And you get an interview with Diane Franklin, and that's 21 minutes, and that's her talking about being this character who not a lot of people like after you watch the movie, and what that was like. It's a little bit about her career. It's her career leading up to getting this film and doing the film, and then what it's been like, being recognized as the character from this film. You get interview with the cinematographer, also very interesting. Adam Greenberg, that's 21 minutes as well, and that's talking about shooting the film. It's talking about his work in Hollywood. It's talking about his work in Israel and how that all came. Sometimes you get interviews that are career spanning that also touch on the film at hand, but these are great because you get a little of the career span, but the focus, the meat of these really is the film we're talking about here. And you get just a great picture of how this movie came to be and how it has impacted the lives of the people that were involved with it. You get a photo gallery, which is an autoplay. It just plays straight through. That's 3 minutes. You get a trailer, the original trailer, and you get a TV spot, which unfortunately looks really bad. I think sometimes these TV spots, the rights holders don't have them anymore, and it may be too difficult to try to hunt down who has a physical copy of these, and it is taken off YouTube, basically. So it's kind of a smeary, not good-looking copy. it's one of those things where anything with YouTube or that's old web video that was put up before people were putting things, at 720 or 1080, the smaller the monitor you watch it on, the better. I believe this one, though, there wouldn't have been a physical copy of this because this is a TV spot that was literally recorded off the air somewhere. So you get the TV spot as it aired during some TV show, but then at the end you get the voice coming on saying, now playing at blah, 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 which is cool. That's even more accurate to the time period. A lot of the old TV spots, if you see them on the old like AIP DVDs and things like that, they're taken from 16 millimeter elements or 35 elements and probably 16. And they have this long stretch of silence at the end, which is where the local announcer would go on and say what theaters it's playing at or when it starts or something like that. A lot of times if you see them on YouTube, they're just ones that were literally recorded off the air, which is kind of cool. Puts you right back in that time and place. So this is a movie that I love. This is a movie that I saw a little as a kid, and I watched it again later, and then I watched it at the right age, and it really hit home with a lot of things for me. Not that I was a teenager in '82; I was 8 in '82, but it was. It really takes you back to that time and place if you lived through it. If you didn't live through it, it takes you back to that time and place. The music is unbelievable. I think there's one song that might not be present in this version. I believe there was a Human League song. I was reading about this. Because I was listening to this and watching the movie, and it's like, this is nonstop hits. How the hell did this all work its way onto home video? Home video is notorious for not being able to afford songs. People get the rights to put the songs in a movie in the days before home video was a thought, and that's great. And then it comes to negotiate home video rights, and it's just cost prohibitive, and they have to start dumping songs out and putting in alternate tunes and putting in sound alikes or whatever, or cutting scenes altogether. And this movie, I was like, wow, there's a lot of huge music in this. Is it all here? And a couple songs are played more than once. So I wondered, was this replacing a song they couldn't get? And apparently, for most home video versions of this, there's a Human League song that they couldn't get the rights to. I don't know if that's the case on this or not. Whether or not that song's in there isn't really relevant. What is in there is great. So even if you don't particularly like the movie, the music is so good. It makes me really want to try to hunt down a copy of the soundtrack to this. So available now from the MVD Rewind collection on Blu-ray, The Last American Virgin.